This is different than when we went through the transition from a gold standard to a debt standard in 1971, because they need to reinvigorate the entire fiat currency system. And what they really have to do is they have to do that overnight revaluation, because gold is the most trusted collateral without any counterparty risk. Having said that, I want to let everybody know that at this point in time, we are not legally obligated to report any part of the transaction. This would be true on American Eagles. It's 100% true on the collectibles without this extra layer of protection, because it's a collectible, isn't it? Lori KO 5939 asked, can you explain what is happening on February 15th for silver owners and how we can fight it as stackers? The privacy is going away and they want to track every ounce we buy and sell. Well, the reality is that's what the whole world wants to do. The question is, are we going to fight? But we'll just stick with this for the moment, because on February 15th, there are new reporting rules that kick in that directly affect those silver stackers in Canada. And, you know, what goes in one place, happens in one place, does not stay there. So it's important for all of us to be aware of. Dealers will be required to report large cash transactions, which they already are in the U.S., verify identities more aggressively, and flag anything they consider unusual. So it doesn't actually make silver illegal, but it does mean the privacy that stackers have relied on is being eroded. So every time you buy or sell through a dealer, more of that information flows into a centralized system. Now, let's just take a look at the bigger picture. The Bank of Canada holds 0 gold, not a single ounce in reserve. That means that if confidence in the currency slips or the financial system hits turbulence, the government has no hard asset buffer of its own. So I did look in there, and there has never been a Canadian overt confiscation. However, they also don't own gold, and that makes it a little risky, because when governments lack reserves, they become far more interested in the hard assets that are held by the public. So while I can't say that confiscation is happening, and again, Canada has never overtly confiscated gold or silver, but structurally, the pressure increases when the state has none and citizens have plenty. And I want you to just remember that the transition that we're in right now, that reset from this one system into the new system, well, we've never really gone through this before. This is different than when we went through the transition from a gold standard to a debt standard in 1971, because they need to reinvigorate the entire fiat currency system. And what they really have to do is they have to do that overnight revaluation, because gold is the most trusted collateral without any counterparty risk.
A striking detail shapes this debate. The Bank of Canada reportedly holds no significant gold reserves. Unlike many central banks that retain bullion as a monetary backstop, Canada relies entirely on fiat credibility and financial system stability. Historically, Canada has not imposed overt gold confiscation. However, when governments lack hard asset buffers, public holdings of gold and silver can attract policy attention during crises. In periods of currency instability, states often prioritize systemic stability over individual wealth preservation. The concern is structural. If confidence falters, policymakers may look more closely at privately held stores of enduring value.
Having said that, I want to let everybody know that at this point in time, we are not legally obligated to report any part of the transaction. This would be true on American Eagles. It's 100% true on the collectibles. So just keep that in mind here in the U.S. But what do they want to do? They want to digitize everything so that it could be used for collateral and they could track everything, the buys and the sells. This is why we have to come together on a global basis and demand our rights back. Because otherwise, we're slaves. That's it. We're slaves. You have to ask yourself, is that okay with me? If it is, don't worry about it. If it's not, then come together and let's get redeemable gold back in the system. Okay, Mr. Petteroni 1 asked, is it possible for gold bullion to be confiscated even if you hold it in a different jurisdiction? As a Canadian holding American Eagles instead of Maples, does that reduce the risk or might be a good exit plan? And, you know, I get this question a lot, whether holding gold or silver in another jurisdiction or in another jurisdiction's form protects them from restrictions at home. And the truth is this: governments regulate based on citizenship and residency, not the mint or the stamp on your coins. So if a country ever imposed controls on bullion, it wouldn't matter whether you held Maple Leafs, Eagles, Philharmonics, or anything else that is bullion. Bars, bullion is bullion, and holding it offshore doesn't eliminate the authority your home country has over its citizens' financial assets, let alone holding it in your country, just a different form of gold, American Eagle versus Canadian Maple Leaf. But you know what? Here's the real takeaway. Because history shows that when governments tighten control, they target the monetary metals, not the collectibles. That's why our sound money strategy is based on the collectibles market.
Since the collapse of the gold convertibility system in 1971 under President Richard Nixon, the world has operated on a debt-based fiat framework. Some analysts argue we are entering another monetary transition, one that could involve currency restructuring or asset repricing. Gold remains globally trusted because it carries no counterparty risk. In theory, a sharp revaluation could strengthen sovereign balance sheets overnight. While such scenarios remain speculative, the pattern of monetary resets shows that governments act decisively when systemic credibility is threatened. The key takeaway: gold's role as collateral makes it strategically important during periods of financial realignment.
I want to remind you, yeah, you can stack bars and you can stack bullion, you can stack all of that, but you can also have a very diversified portfolio that includes what we could hold even when you couldn't. So the collectibles of all kinds, right? They have layers of protection that bullion coins do not have. That's why it's critically important for everybody to understand the true fundamental value. How much is this stuff really worth in terms of dollars or euros or wherever you happen to be in the world, in terms of that currency? What's its true value? Because that's where it's going. I can't give you a whole lot of guarantees, but I can guarantee that I will show up and I will do the work. And I can also guarantee that at some point, all assets go to their true fundamental value. I did a little experiment because I bought this when I was in Malaysia and Cambodia, and it's a sterling silver belt. Right? And the workmanship on it is really beautiful. And I happened to wear it yesterday for the first time, and I thought to myself, you know, I bought this, when did I go? It was like the end of September. So before the big run on the spot markets. And at that time, I think I paid like, I don't know, $300, $325, something like that for the belt. So I happened to wear it yesterday, and I thought, I wonder how much this thing weighs, because I never weighed it. But I did, and it weighs 10.7 ounces. That means that what took me, you know, $300 or $325 to buy in September is now just the monetary value of it, worth double what I paid for it in terms of fiat. without this extra layer of protection because it's a collectible, isn't it?
History reveals multiple episodes where governments restricted or revalued gold. In the United States, the 1933 order under President Franklin D. Roosevelt required citizens to surrender gold, followed by a sharp revaluation in 1934. Later, the 1971 suspension of dollar convertibility effectively ended the Bretton Woods system. These actions demonstrate a pattern. During war, depression, or inflationary crises, monetary policy shifts rapidly. Importantly, regulations typically apply based on citizenship and residency, not the mint origin of coins. Holding eagles, maples, or philharmonics does not change jurisdictional authority over assets.
Daniel Mastrocco last week said, I'm curious what the 5 gold confiscations in the U.S. government has done. Google doesn't provide the results. Maybe you can make a short video on that. And that's what I'm doing. So these are, and actually when I went back and I kind of looked at the definition, again, I'm wrong, right? It's not 5 times, it's 7 times. And I'm also not just looking at the overt confiscations, but the currency revaluations. And I didn't have those in my list. The two, oh, did I say this? The 2 that happened in 1973, the first one in January, which was just under 10% revaluation, and the one in February that was just over a 10% revaluation. They did it in measured strokes so that you and I, well, those of us that were around then, didn't really notice it too much, except I can tell you, I remember the inflation that was happening during that period of time a lot, something about 45%. So I think it just missed the hyperinflation definition of 50%. But here they are. In 1812, contracts that were invalidated and the mints were closed. In the 1860s, the government went further by physically confiscating gold and voiding private contracts. In 33, citizens were forced to surrender their gold, and in 34, the government revalued it overnight, capturing 40% of the public's wealth with a single stroke. And guess what? Based on all the money that they created up to 33, they should have done it to 42.22, but they knew that the public wouldn't be able to tolerate it. So we started out, even after the revaluations, in a deficit. In 1971, convertibility for other governments was cut off entirely. That was a Bretton Woods default. And, you know, I never really thought about it as a confiscation, but it was totally a confiscation because foreign governments that were holding their gold here with the promise that they could exchange dollars for gold anytime they wanted, that was the default. Right? Because we said, nope, you can't do it anymore, which means that the U.S. confiscated the global gold. And by 73, that gold was revalued twice more. So understand this, the pattern is unmistakable because, let me show you this. I thought, well, here's just a list of all the times just since, well, I think we go to 1812, the number of times and the different countries that have done overt and reasonably covert confiscations.
Today's volatility in gold and silver largely reflects leveraged derivatives trading rather than immediate physical shortages. Futures, swaps, and options dominate price discovery, often dwarfing available bullion. According to data from the Bank for International Settlements, derivatives exposure in precious metals has historically far exceeded physical supply. When influential traders build large short positions, especially in silver, price swings intensify. If those bets destabilize markets, central banks may intervene to prevent systemic fallout. This dynamic highlights a widening gap between paper claims and tangible metal, a structural vulnerability that becomes more visible during stressed conditions.
Of the global financial system as a long line of dominoes. Some are big, some are small. You know, at first they're all standing upright and they're all connected. What is happening in the metals market right now is a problem. It is the first big domino. And remember, we've been talking now for over a year about the transition from the paper markets controlling the prices to the physical markets. What we're talking about here, because people are going crazy. There's so much volatility in those spot gold and silver contracts. They are contracts. The physical markets do not move that fast. But look at this. This is a trader who made billions on gold contracts, suddenly betting against silver, meaning selling it short. That's not a casual move. That's a heavyweight leaning in, using the leverage of the paper contracts. And when someone with that kind of track record shifts their position, it's going to matter. And it's because they can feel the instability and they sense the wobble. They know that the dominoes are closer to falling than anyone wants to admit. And remember, silver is the fuse. It straddles both worlds, so it's a lot more volatile. But this trader, he's not reacting to physical silver. These physical markets, they just do not move that fast. He's reacting to the paper market, a leverage contract stacked so high that they're swaying. That's what we're seeing right now. It's really so interesting. And you know, when one big domino tips over, it doesn't fall alone. This shows you what happens when the pressure spreads from a single trader to an entire government's central counterparty intervention. They had to, because it threatened the entire very fragile paper system. It's political weight, because when a government steps in, especially one as large and influential as China, it means that the position is big enough and the leverage is heavy enough that it threatens total stability in all the markets. This isn't about ounces of silver. It's about those contracts. Short, hello, see, she wanted to come in and see it. Hi, baby. But shorts are selling something that you don't own, and then you anticipate that pushing down the price so you can go in and buy it cheaper, and then you earn that difference between what you sold it at and what you go in and buy it at. But what I really want you to understand as well is a lot of this are naked shorts. So where a short position, you might be short against the box, it's called, against the box, meaning he's got the physical silver over here, but he shorts the paper contracts. That means that if you had to, you could go in and deliver that out. But this position was so large that this was considered a naked short, which means there's no silver that can be delivered. This is huge because, again, once a government intervenes in a short position, it tells you that the paper side has grown too large relative to the real metal underneath. Now the dominoes, they're leaning harder and they're leaning faster. And frankly, they're leaning in one direction.
Recent charts show gold trading significantly above its 200-day moving average, while silver has exhibited even greater divergence, signals of heightened speculative momentum. The gold-silver ratio, a traditional gauge of relative value, has fluctuated sharply, reflecting shifting investor sentiment. Such extremes rarely occur in calm markets. They emerge when leverage builds and confidence wobbles. Corrections are normal, but persistent dislocations suggest deeper structural transitions underway. Whether this phase results in consolidation or broader monetary change remains uncertain. What is clear is that precious metals continue to serve as barometers, measuring trust, liquidity, and stress within the global financial architecture.